So KiwiSaver, there'll be a different amount of expertise in the room. So if you know a lot about KiwiSaver, think of this presentation as being for those around you, maybe for your colleagues, for your families. There'll be some things in here. What I thought we could do is basically just take a walk through Sorted's KiwiSaver Fund Finder, which is a tool that we built in order to have let people interact with the vast amount of data that we have for fees and returns on KiwiSaver. But I thought that I'd start with a short film that we have. These days at the Commission we're producing more and more video, and shows a little bit about the changing demographics of KiwiSaver and the changing attitudes towards KiwiSaver. So this is just a couple minutes.
3 to 4 years ago, I probably wouldn't have called myself an investor. I kind of fell into KiwiSaver. I ended up missing the window, and I ended up getting quite annoyed about it actually, because being on an apprentice wage, it's quite hard to, sustain a lifestyle when you don't get paid a whole lot. So $20 a week is a big thing. I knew that there was $20 going somewhere else, and like I said, $20 for me is a big thing. It can change what I eat a week, or what I do, or who I see, where I go. And because I had other payments coming out and so forth, student loans, and it was just another thing on my mind that I was like, I'm losing money here when I get paid. But it's been actually quite worthwhile after seeing the growth. I happened to check it on my phone and I was like, oh wow, it's actually growing. I haven't been looking at it, but it's actually grown over the last 2 years. I think it was about a year ago maybe that I checked it, and I was really pleasantly surprised actually. And then I checked it again last night and I was even more surprised. So it's, it's growing, and there's interest, and all the rest of it is great. So for the last 3 or 4 years it's done a good dash. I suppose unintentionally saving this money has been quite good, especially, I'm getting a bit older now, and I'm starting to think about what I'm going to do in the next years of my life, where I want to be, where I want to end up, the sort of houses I'm trying to look at, maybe buying out of Auckland. And it's been really helpful knowing that this money is actually being put away, because I haven't had to do a whole lot of work. Ever since I've started working properly, I haven't had to do a whole lot of work of putting aside and keeping myself strict about the money. It's already been done for me. In the long run, it's going to be a great help to my future, definitely. Whether I end up buying a house or not, or just for retirement, it's going to be an excellent help. Knowing that I don't have to worry about any of that, it's all kind of taken care of, and I'm doing my little part for it, and the government's done a little part for it, and the employer's done a little part for it. It's just kind of peace of mind. It's another thing I don't have to think about. Yeah, I would call myself an investor now, an inadvertent investor, I suppose you could call me, but still happy about the investment that I've made, definitely.
Yeah, so that's our inadvertent investor, and it shows a lot about the attitudes towards KiwiSaver in the country today. A lot of people in KiwiSavers don't even consider themselves investors. They consider themselves savers, just putting money away either for a housing deposit or for retirement. And part of, at the Commission, one of the things that we worry about in terms of people's attitudes towards KiwiSaver comes out there as well, where he's thinking that because he's in KiwiSaver, he doesn't have to think about his retirement. And for us, KiwiSaver is only a part of the solution. And so if you look at, and we've got some calculators to show this, of what contribution it can make, or what income it can give you in retirement, you'll see that it's only a portion for many people, that they'll need other solutions. But given that we have KiwiSaver, what's the best way to manage it? Okay. And we think that people are going to really start to pay attention when their balance gets to about as big as a small car. And people's balances are starting to get there. Overall, the average is about 9,300. So in the next year or so, in the next coming months, we think we're going to see a lot more interest in people getting very much engaged with how to manage their KiwiSaver. So in New Zealand, it's been a great time for KiwiSaver. We've been involved with it since it rolled out 6 years ago. And one of the things that we really found is that it was hard to compare funds and hard to choose what would be the right fund for you. So we built something called the KiwiSaver Fund Finder. And I'd just like to walk you through this tool. It launched last November. And it's based on quarterly data from all the providers, from the KiwiSaver providers in the country. And this data hits this tool. And what we try to do is give the data some context. And context is so important because if someone tells you, for example, that a fund is returning 5%, it's very hard to tell, is that good? Is that bad? How does that compare to all the others? So for the first time, when we had the KiwiSaver disclosure regulations that came out last year, and the data started to be provided at the end of last September, we were able to give it some context. So, for example, if we went back to Victorian times and you were telling somebody who normally rode around in a carriage about a car that went 55 kilometers per hour, they'd be really impressed. You know, they think it was great, but they wouldn't know that actually today we've got cars that, you know, routinely go twice as fast and can even go 3 times as fast and even higher. So what we tried to do is build a tool that gives that context. So if you're looking at, for example, at balanced funds and you're looking at what the fees are for balanced funds, you'll be able to see what the averages are and how they compare. So let me show you how this works. There are many different criteria to use in choosing a KiwiSaver fund. And I think if you, for those of you who are in KiwiSaver now, if you think about why did you choose the KiwiSaver fund you're in, there's lots of different reasons why you might. People are choosing on the basis of a popular brand. People are choosing on the basis of convenience. If you have all your accounts, for example, with a certain bank, you might want to see your KiwiSaver there too, just keep it all in one place. For us at Sorted, what we wanted to do, we started to ask ourselves, well, how should anyone pick a KiwiSaver fund? What are the real criteria that people should use when they're picking? And the first one for us is the level of risk. So KiwiSaver funds, they range from more defensive funds, which have, for example, are invested more in cash, to much more aggressive funds, which are, for example, invested in shares. So the first thing is to try to figure out what type of KiwiSaver fund is right for you. And so what we did was we came up with 3 questions. And these questions are based on time. The first one's based on time. The second 2 are based on your attitude towards risk. Now, I can invite you all, actually, if you'd like, the KiwiSaver Fund Finder is actually the first tool that we built for Sorted that's responsive, and it works really well on a handset. So if any of you would like to follow along on your handset, I can tell you the site to do that, and you could actually see for yourself what type of fund might be right for you. The site is easy to remember. It's just fundfinder.sorted.org.nz. You can see it up here, actually. Fundfinder.org. Fundfinder.sorted.org.nz. So I'll just throw in some responses here. For example, if you're just starting out with KiwiSaver, or you have 10 years or more before you retire, you might select this. And what we're finding is a lot of people in New Zealand are sort of in the middle of the road in terms of their attitudes towards risk. So I might choose this one here. What's most important to you while you're saving? Almost certainly ending up with more than I put in, despite some ups and downs along the way. And the third, what range of gains and losses are you comfortable with over a single year? And again, I'll choose a middle one, 10% loss to 20% gain. And the tool will tell you. Sounds like you should be looking at balanced funds. So what we're finding is a lot of people are playing with their answers here. For example, if you switch that last one, it'll change to growth funds. Switch this one, and it'll change to aggressive. So let's compare growth funds. This will send you back to that beginning screen that we started with. So we We finished this step. We're now here. It's populated growth funds. By the way, if you're using this tool, it's really powerful. You can go to all funds, and there are 197 funds in there right now. Let's stay with growth funds a second. Now, first criteria in picking a KiwiSaver fund, find the fund with the right level of risk for you. So we've done that. We've done that profiler at the beginning. Second criteria for us, it's sorted, and this is in order of importance, is the level of fees. And we feel it's important not necessarily to choose just the lowest fees, but actually the most reasonable fees, and what you're prepared to pay for the results and for the services that you get. So let's look at fees a second. You can hit this button here, and we'll be comparing growth funds based on fees. And this is starting with lowest first. And you'll see in this tool we've wrapped a lot of educational things, informational things for you of why fees are important, for example. And in this case, this is a historical view of fees. So these are the fees that you would have been charged if you would have been carrying the average balance. In this case, it's $8,100 in this tool at the moment. It changes each quarter. Had you carried that balance for the year ending the 31st of March, 2014. So this is last year. So it's not a realistic measure, but it allows us to look at all of the KiwiSaver funds and compare apples with apples as opposed to apples with pineapples or something like that. So as you can see, we're starting from the lowest here. And as you scroll down, these dials, they just dial up. A full circle in this case would be the highest amount of fees being charged for growth funds. So if I just keep scrolling down the bottom, you'll see these dials coming up. And so this is the highest one. For some funds, we don't have that 1 year data. And so those will just get piled into the bottom here. And we won't be able to compare them. OK, so level of risk, reasonable fees. The third criteria that we'd suggest that people should use when they're choosing a KiwiSaver fund is the services that a provider and scheme would give. And what we did, that wasn't given to us through the disclosure data. We put together a survey ourselves. And the survey, and we'll be able to sort here, the survey goes out every 6 months, and we're trying to shadow the services that the different providers are offering to you. And I can tell you some more when we unpack these a little bit later on the services. That survey, I guess the most important thing I can tell you, since I'm not going to go into every single detail, is that those services are the range of services, whether, for example, a provider has a call center or not. We're not going to tell you whether they have a great call center or not. We're just going to say whether they have one. So it's a quantitative measure. We're basically telling you how many services, the range of services that each offers. So in this case, for example, Fidelity with 89% of the questions that were asked, Aon 83, and it scrolls down there. One thing I want to mention is that there's a watch list function on this tool. So if you just click here, you'll be able to come back on the device you're looking at. It's specific to the device, and come back and look at these funds afterwards. And the last one, actually I can show you this now. So on any of the funds that you're looking at, if you want to see the details, you can click down and there's a page for each fund to look at. And then you can start to unpack some of those and get the context that I was mentioning to you. So for example, on this one, for fees, this one would charge 1.85. This is what the average is, in this case, for growth funds. And you can open it up and see what that's made up of. So we've got the flat membership fees and then the total fund fees in percentages. There's an example down here as well. So in a growth fund of 8,100, that's that average again. The fees over here would be approximately, for this fund, 150. And on average, it would be 136. So this is slightly above, a bit above average. Down below, we've got the services. This is basically breaking out percentages for that survey, that 6 monthly survey that we do to all providers. And on this one, this shows, for example, they give you a bit more help with investment options, a bit more than average for communications to members, and then other services like contacting you if you haven't contributed enough to get the member tax credit on KiwiSaver. Let's go back up a level to that comparison page and just look at returns. Because returns, a lot can be said about returns, and a lot of people are looking for them. What we're looking at here is the 5-year. For us at Sorted, we think we should look as far back as we have data for. So we chose to compare on the 5-year model here. And then lower down in the details page, actually we'll go back to 10 years when we have them. Now we'll have 6 years of data. So I'm just watch listing a couple different ones. And again, you'll see, the other thing I'd mention is that this returns figure is after tax and after fees. So in a way, it's helpful to break out and look at the fees, but we are actually giving you this number after, with the impact of the fees on your results. Another thing I'd mention is that in the tool here, you can check your own current fund. So if you just want to come into the tool and see how your fund is doing, those of you following on the handset, I'd invite you to do that. But say if we picked ANZ, one of the default, say the conservative fund here, be able to see just for this. The provider has given us some text about this given fund that you can learn more about it. And then I want to show you under returns, you'll be able to see the breakout for every year, the last 12 months, but then for each, KiwiSaver works on a year ending the 31st of March each year, so you can see that here. In gray, always the averages during that time. So as the market, you can see right here, the GFC, that this fund, though on average lots of other funds were doing a lot worse, this one did slightly better. Other details that we give you is where your money is going if it's in this fund. So we're giving you the percentage in terms of what's held as cash, bonds, property, shares, and other. So this is the actual mix of investments. It's like a snapshot of what's in each fund at the end of the quarter. It's not what their target is, but it's actually what they're disclosing as what's held in it. We include some more information about the fund, the top 10 investments, and the key personnel who are involved with investing your money. If you like, you can key in your email address here, and we'll let you know each quarter when this tool is updated with new data. So you can go and see how your fund is doing or how funds in general are. Finally, let's take a look at the watch list just a moment. So in your watch list, and these are the 5 that I chose before, if you remember, you can then just sort for the watch list on fees or on services or again on returns to see which of these that you could pursue or look into if you're interested in switching. But we have a lot of messages in this tool of what to think about in terms of fees, fund types, service, returns, and switching. And you'll find them here under what we call the must-knows of KiwiSaver. Now this tool has done pretty well. We launched it in November of last year, and there have been about 85,000 people who have used it. They've stayed on the site for more than 5 minutes, looking at 9 pages, which is a good result in terms of web pages, where lots of people just come and go quite quickly. So we're quite happy with that. But the biggest thing we're happy about last week we're actually able to put this tool right on the New Zealand Herald. So you can also find it there. And you'll see it's just loaded right in here, although you'll be navigating to it off of the Herald website. Now another thing I'd mention is that back on Sorted, we've got another calculator. If you're interested in fees, under calculators we've got something called the KiwiSaver Fees Calculator that can give you a personal view of the impact of fees over the years that you're in KiwiSaver. And I filled out one here, for example, that we took this data and fed it into this calculator as well. And you can see I picked a person who's 24 and who's earning about $70,000 a year. And this person, if they chose this fund, at age 65 they will have paid about close to $28,000. If they chose the highest one, they would be paying close to $66,000. So it's a big impact. It's a big difference. So you can sort on here by active and passive funds and also by percentages and see what the impact is. So these two tools work together to give you good information about KiwiSaver and the different funds out there. And then just to wrap up, I wanted to mention Money Week. For those of you who haven't heard, the week of the 13th of October, there'll be a series of events throughout the country based on raising people's financial literacy. And I'd invite you to come to moneyweek.org.nz to find events near you, or if you're involved, you know, maybe for your workplace, your community group, and you'd like to run an event, there's a whole, a lot of resources and a lot of ways to register your event and get some profile for it. So here you see some of the events that are happening around the country. So that's it for me.